excited to get to be up here and talk to you about a couple different things. Just a note, if you have a question, you can raise your hand. I know we will have a time for questions at the end, so you are welcome to ask at the end. But we keep it kind of casual up here. We're going to keep it kind of casual. If you have a question, go for it. We would love to answer your questions as they come, because we're trying to craft kind of an organic conversation here around mental health and the topic of resilience. So I'm going to kick us off with a definition of resilience. You've got a sheet that's got this blue little box at the top that also tells you what I'm about to say. But we're going to talk about a variety of different topics today regarding what is resilience and how do I build it in my kids. Also, we have a special guest with us. Our speaker is right over there in the corner, and you would think, honestly, that we had talked to each other before this. So, it's been, what a blessing that we're gonna continue on actually some of the topics that he was just talking about. So if you're in the morning session, hopefully this is gonna feel pretty cohesive. That's the goal. So let's talk a little bit about what is resilience. My guess would be you have heard this topic before. It's kind of a buzzword, if you will. It's a lot of us are thinking about, how do I build a resilient kid? How do I raise a kid that is gonna be able to rise to the challenge of daily life? And so really what we want to talk about today is how can I raise a kid that's going to be able to adapt? So when we talk about resilience, we want to talk a little bit about adapting. How can we adapt to all of these things that are happening in today's world, like adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or even just significant sources of stress? A couple of things that I want to point out to you just from the jump is resilience is actually a skill. A lot of times we think resilience is that's something you were born with, or it's you got it or you don't, and really research does not suggest that. It's actually something that you can grow throughout your lifetime. Now, the wonderful thing about kids is if you are able to build that in childhood, and Gerald's going to kick us off talking about some childhood experiences, that's going to really set our kids up for success. And part of the reason I love working with children is it's a really important important time developmentally, but also we just have a lot of fun in our sessions. If you ever a fly on a wall in some of my sessions, we're playing Uno, we're jumping around my office, we're having a good time, and we'll talk about that too, the importance of things like play, things like connection that are really important to help build resilience in kids. So Gerald's going to kick us off because the first point on that sheet is all about connection. Chris, I think, did an awesome job talking about prioritizing connection in the session, and he gave some wonderful examples. So if you didn't catch that, I would highly recommend, go. It's on YouTube. I think you're going to be able to watch it again because he really highlighted the importance of connection. And what we're looking at, you've got another sheet there too that's got a balance beam kind of thing. It's the second sheet that is not stapled. And that's from Harvard, and it talks about when we look at resilience, yes, there is a genetic component. That's the middle part, or a fulcrum, I think. I didn't know what that meant until I read that. And so genetics are going to play a part into where that fulcrum, middle part is. But what we're looking at balancing is things like those positive experiences, positive outcomes and negative outcomes. So what we're going to talk about, Gerald's going to kick us off with is what are some things, and we're going to talk about something called the ACE scores. Some of you may be familiar with that term. It's adverse childhood experiences, and that's the first of your stapled packet. Those are some of the things that sometimes our kids it's beyond our control. Our kids experience that, and we try and work hard sometimes to protect our kids from these experiences, but things happen, life happens. And so those are some of the negative, an example of some of the negative things we're trying to counterbalance with positive stuff. So I've talked enough already. We're going to kick it over to Gerald.
Thank you all for being here. We've been planning this since late September, October, and now it's here. So last night I was dreaming that it was here, and we're here. But I was going to level the playing field with you all and let you know that you all are as smart as I am. I'm not coming up here with some word from God. We're all parents. I successfully didn't kill either of mine, so I think that's why I'm here. So leveling the field, if you all disagree with me, that's fine. I've been disagreed with before. I'll still love you. But I'm just going to talk about some things that happened in my career working with the adolescents. I want you all to know that you're not the perfect parents, but by your attendance here today, you're trying to be. But we're not perfect. And but we're trying. It's a hard job. It's a hard job. Being a grandparent brings back some trauma about when I had my children, but I can pass my grandchildren on. And this might come as a shock to you. We don't have perfect children. Sometimes I get stuff thrown at me at this point, but we don't. We don't. But our children are loved, and they're given every opportunity. We give them the support, and like Pat Summitt used to say, they've got to start the engine. We can't start the engine, but we can give them all the support that they need, but they've got to have the drive about it. This ACE score, I use this a lot at work. When I used to work with death row inmates at Riverbend in Nashville, they got A pluses on this test. They got A plus. Oops, watch me fall.
Would you like to talk a little bit about, on a lot of these measures, they're like, oh, you want a low score.
You want to, yeah, you. It was amazing as they were reading my bio. I'm thinking, who is this person? There ain't no way. Because I was raised one of those hillbilly elegy families. I-27 in Liberty, Kentucky, went to Cincinnati, my grandparents and uncles to work, came back, and we were just plain, I'm not trying to be J.D. Vance here, but just plain old-fashioned people. And my parents always instilled that in me. You're going to just be a plain person, Gerald. You're going to be fine. And I think, so number 7, I get a plus on number 7. I was always put down by my parents. You're never going to amount to anything, and that's okay. But there was a drive in me that said, no, that's not what I'm going to do. And so the big thing at the bottom talks about experiences in childhood are just one part of a person's life story. There are many ways to heal. And I've had, working with adolescents, a lot of times we're getting some positive stuff in terms of abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse. We can overcome that. It seemed like when I worked in the field of psychiatry, the first 15 minutes of our day were with the more acute patients, the sickest patients. And by 8:15 every morning, I didn't have any problems in my life. My life was perfect. But it's just like we're all here, we're trying to learn the skills, and just by being here trying to learn the skills, we're a step above most other families. So again, I thank you for being here. The second page, this is a lot of information. In the coming weeks and months, if you all take this home and review it and never have a question, make sure you seek Mollie out, because or ask me what's going on. I was going to talk about the internal things that go on in our brain. The amygdala, I know Dr. Watson knows what the amygdala is, but y'all know what the amygdala is? It's a glob of cells that are in the central part of the brain that take pictures. Everything, my amygdala is taking pictures right now of everything that's happening, thousands of pictures a second, and they're being stored in the hippocampus. And so when they called me the other day and said, Gerald, there's going to be 76 people in this workshop. 70? What? I can't do 76 people. And then my hippocampus reminded me, well, you've talked to 300 people before, Gerald. You can do this. So immediately there was that calm down, and it just took a second for that to happen. But everything that's ever happened in your life is recorded by the amygdala, stored in the hippocampus. And sometimes when our kids are driving us crazy, at a moment when we're tired, hungry, there's just not enough time in a day, some issue is going to happen. And then all of a sudden, everything, the sensory data, the thoughts, the feelings, how did I handle this before? And sometimes it's just so overwhelming. Boom, we're screaming at our kids. And we're sitting there thinking, why is this happening? Just think of the amygdala and the hippocampus. It's stored memories. Things we do right, our hippocampus tells us we're going to be okay. But everything that happens in our life is being stored, and it's being itemized where we can pull from it and see, well, I can do this. I can do this. And so sometimes when something's happening in our life, there's a deeper meaning for it happening than it happening. It's memories that have been stored, how our parents dealt with a situation. I swore when I became a parent, I'd never be like my parents. And then when I had kids, I couldn't call my parents fast enough to say, what do you do about this? Well, remember, Gerald? So it's a situation that we deal with every day. And stress. Need to talk to you all about, Dr. Chris mentioned this morning how we have to have moments where we've had rest, sleep, nutrition. Sometimes on Wednesday night, I see these kids coming in with backpacks as big as a hippopotamus. And I'm thinking, what are we doing to these kids? And sometimes on Wednesday night when I'm seeing them, I'm like, don't come to church. Stay home and rest. Rest. We don't do that enough anymore. It's just crazy.
Yeah, and I loved how you talked about Power School. I cannot tell you, I'm gonna be real here. I would echo that because I cannot tell you how many kids come sit on my couch and they are telling me, oh, my parents are all over me. I took this quiz, it was out of 4, and they're like almost tripping over themselves trying to explain it to me, and what I'm doing is I'm like, okay, let's take a breath, like, it's out of 4. It's out of 4. If you get 2 out of 4, that's 50%. Bam, you failed it. Who cares? I got a D in pre-cal and I have a master's degree. Like, it will be okay. So I loved how you talked about that because the reality is, and you have to forgive us, Gerald and I are flipping between handouts here. Connection is that is the biggest and most important thing. If you remember nothing else, definitely remember what Gerald said because he's super smart and intelligent. But also remember, the biggest indicator of being able to build resilience is a relationship with a caring adult. If that is not first, it does not matter what other type of skills you're putting in because they have nothing to build from. So you've got to build that connection with your kids. And I loved how we were talking in session about and something I thought about too is there's a C I did not put on here, and that's control. How much control do we really have as parents? Now, mine are super little, so my 2-year-old running around this morning while I'm trying to wrestle pants on him, I'm like, yep, I don't have control, I know that. Or when you see him running through the halls, just remember that. But remember, when we prioritize connection, we are recognizing that we don't have control, but we do have a relationship with the one that does have control, which is God. God's in control of our kids, and by choosing to prioritize connection over control, we are recognizing that, and that's a beautiful thing. So we're going to talk about, Gerald's been talking a lot about this wheel as a beautiful recognition of communication. How do we communicate with our kids? And part of that is, by prioritizing that connection piece, we are recognizing a couple of different things. One, you gotta initiate conversation. I know I see some people with a variety of different age ranges. If you've got really young littles, they're probably not gonna be able to tell you something, so maybe you prioritize play with them. Get down on their level. Play with the magnetiles and the blocks in the play kitchen and get in there and recognize play is a super important part of childhood. If you've got some older kiddos, recognize you're gonna have to go up to them first. I can't tell you how many kids I've had in my office. I've actually had to work with some parents I know your kid is not talking to you. It's okay, teenage boys don't talk. I promise they don't. So recognize and I know you guys know this, we're prioritizing communication by recognizing we're gonna be the bridge and talk to them first and check in often because a lot of times kids will fill in the blanks. Gerald, I'm sure you've had people in your office over the time where a kid has really just filled in the blanks and it is, bless their little hearts, just really wrong. So I'll give you a quick example. Speaking of COVID times, I had a kid, I was doing home-based, so I'm like playing in his home, we're like playing with stuff, and he just point blank asked me, he goes, when am I gonna die? And I said, what? What are you talking about, bud? Like, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, on the news it said that like you could die, so when am I gonna die from COVID? And so this sweet little baby had just filled in the blanks. And his caregivers, it's not that they did anything wrong, it's just that kids fill in the blanks, and we don't always know the types of information they're receiving. So when you're communicating with kids, I really encourage you to check in with them often. Like, even if they're not asking you something, doesn't mean they're not thinking about it.
One of these handouts that I gave y'all, it talks about conflict between parents and adolescents. I think it's the fourth one in. And to echo what Mollie says, it talks about communication is so important. Be non-judgmental, sort of back to the hippocampus. I mean, don't be screaming at your kids. I've been in sessions where it just plays out. All of a sudden, the father just starts screaming at the child. And I'm like, what are you doing? Well, this is how I get their attention. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. And 9.5 out of 10 times when I used to do family sessions, the child was the most mentally healthy person in the room. It was the parents. And I'm like, and I am not a believer in medications. I don't prescribe medicines to adolescents, but I do prescribe medications to their parents. I mean, we have got to calm down. And a lot of times it's the parents, the transference. They want their kid to be them or better than them. Maybe mommy couldn't be the winner of Miss Scott County, but by golly, the daughter was. Or maybe the son was going to be the next superstar like Patrick Mahomes, but the kid hates football. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So transference, we're not our kids. Our kids have their own little amygdala and their own little hippocampus, and we can't see what's in their hippocampus and amygdala. But we're trying to put ourselves into our kids' lives. It's not fair to the child. I mean, they're their own little person, and when they get 18, it's time to launch. But communication is so important, and non-judgmental communication. Don't be yelling at your child because they don't have the tools that we do. At 70 years of age, I've lost tools. I mean, I have been so fortunate through my career to have people allow me to go on their journey with them. And it's amazing to see people come out the other side. Mollie and I aren't like Dr. Watson, where you can go in with an infection and Dr. Watson gives you an antibiotic and you're fixed. I'm spending at least 6 hours with a person just trying to cut through all the chafe to see what's going on here. And if you'd just be honest with me, let these family secrets go. This is your child we're trying to work with here. But stay calm. Don't be yelling. Because if I come into a room and somebody's yelling, where am I going to come in at? Underneath, trying to bring them down. Don't be getting in a yelling match. No one's going to win. It's a waste of time. If everybody's talking at once, like happens in a family session, stop. We got to take some turns here. And if your son or daughter says something, don't dismiss it. We were blessed to have Jason, our son. He's Harry Potter. Perfect. Then our daughter came 6 years later, Voldemort. Holy smoke. What happened? The same parents, the same teaching styles. What happened? I mean, did I smoke a cigarette or something and mess up the genetic pool? What happened here? But thankfully, Jessie came out of it. She's in a responsible position at Vanderbilt now. I wouldn't have given Jessie, just go marry a doctor, Jessie. Jessie has been our shining star, a shining star. So you never know what's going to come of our children, but we have to support them. Is that what you wanted me to hand off about?
Yeah.
Please, good.
Yeah. And I'm just so fortunate to be next to someone that has so much like experience, like professionally, but also like parenting wise. Like, I'm still really, really, my kids are super young, so it's nice to have like, we did it and our children survived.
They didn't die. Jesse, Baltimore came close.
So we're gonna go into create, which is also,
There's a question back there.
oh, question.
I just want to make a comment. I learned from somebody that if you're dealing with something, instead of getting loud, you hold their hand, you won't get loud.
Yeah, that's a
Boom.
great point.
Perfect. Perfect.
Your mind won't let you get elevated.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
What you wanted to say. I was taught by a friend a long time ago, and it works.
Thanks for sharing. That's very good. Very good.
Yeah, that's great. Also, I piggyback off of that. Don't be afraid to take a parent timeout. Like, if you're like part of when you get to create the environment in your home. So you can create the target of what are you aiming for? Like, am I aiming to have a calm and loving and consistent environment? And so kind of remembering this is what I'm aiming for. So it's okay if I am losing it because I get it. We lose it. Like, our kids we love them and they stress us out. And they've got a lot, they're their own little humans, right? They're their own little people. So when that's happening, it's okay to take a beat, take a breath, give them, get them a snack, get you a snack, go get a drink of water. Recognize when we're both what's called like emotionally flooded, meaning like the part of our brain that is like reasoning and responsibleness, it is gone. So recognize you've got to model regulation yourself, meaning I'm gonna bring all of those good reasoning things back online, and by choosing to engage in this and help my kid engage in this, you're modeling and creating a place in your home where you can do that. Another quick thing that I wanted to see how we're doing on time over here. Ooh, we got 4 minutes left, Gerald. So we're doing good. Something I want to talk about. I'm curious. Is anybody in Danny's study? Anybody gone to? Okay, great. That's a great study. I would honestly hope that he does it again. If you haven't, just go up to him and be like, do it again. Like, we want to do the study again. There's a quote in there that I really love that's talking about, when we talk about creating, part of it is, you'll note in the sheet, we're talking about something. Has anyone ever heard the term lawnmower parent? Anybody? Yep, we heard it. Okay, so how many of you have heard of a helicopter parent? Yeah? Okay, a lot of us have heard of a helicopter parent. The next step up from that is a lawnmower parent, meaning you are mowing down all of your kids' problems and making it smooth sailing. And let me tell you, when you're talking about building resilience, that is probably one of the worst things you could do for your kids. And let me tell you why. Because you're not giving them the opportunity to rise to what's called a healthy stressor, meaning like, this part of your brain, the executive functioning part, that doesn't even fully come online until you're 25 at a minimum, closer to 30. So part of it too is like recognizing as our kids are having healthy development, we can help build those what's called executive functioning skills, planning, mental flexibility, like the ability to regulate. And so if we mow every single stressor down, we are not giving that an opportunity to grow at all. So what you can do to kind of protect that is give them the opportunity to kind of work some of that out, especially some of our older teens. Like Gerald said, a target of yours should be, we are launching this kid off. They're not gonna live in our home forever. I don't think anyone's goal is, I want my kid to be living in my basement for the end of time. We want them to be healthy and successful adults, so that starts by providing some ability to give them a chance to work things out on their own. The second part of that, super quick, is, and where I'm tying in Jonathan Haidt's quote, is we are unfortunately trending towards overprotecting in real life, lawnmower parent, and underprotecting our kids online. Caleb and I could tell you, we can tell instantly when someone gets a cell phone. It's like they come in and they are a different kid. Like, it's wild. And I have, I've been working with kids and families for about 10 years. And as the more I've worked with teens, I have seen a trend of increased anxiety, like bullying. Especially teen girls are really high risk for getting into some really nasty, not great things at even younger and younger ages. So I would say, really encourage you, if you want to be overprotective and the mean mom, online, do it online. Like, the Surgeon General has actually recommended that kids don't even need social media until they're 16. They don't need smartphones. They don't need any of this other stuff. What they need is your connective presence in real life, coming alongside and discipling them.
I was going to finish up my piece with the last couple pages in my handout, supports in my life. This is our faith family. I was 29 in 1983. Yeah, I think that's right. I was y'all's age, and I'm not y'all's age anymore. But everybody you see walking around here with gray hair, the McCalls, the Schladers, the Watts, the Kellys, all had roles in raising my children. And we bounced things off of each other. They were my faith family. And in Sunday school, sometimes we were late starting Sunday school because we were just trying to figure out our kids. And but when I look at the gray-haired people, it takes me back 40 some years. And if it wasn't for them, my job would have been a whole lot harder. So what I'm saying is, for y'all, get close, work with each other, share your concerns, and you'd be surprised the concerns you have are many times the concerns that we all have. That's why group therapy works. If I do my job in a group therapy session of 10 people, I don't ever have to talk. I just start it off with a question and boom, there it goes. So stay close to each other, the faith family. And you'd be surprised how many people we're close to in this crazy world that we live in, where sometimes our closest relatives are states away or hundreds of miles away. This is our faith family, and this meant a lot to me and Diana to have our group. And we aged well together. We're all still alive. Kids are alive. Win-win.
Yeah, I think that's, Gerald, you just beautifully summarized our last point there, which is, I have to say, I wanted to put Christian community on there, but the top three are verbs, so I couldn't put a noun at the bottom. So I put congregate. But just to look into the type A brain that you're dealing with right now, it is such a beautiful place to have that support that is the church. Now, the Harvard study, which is where that kind of seesaw handout is from, actually independently found, and this was about 10 years ago, that a faith community, they also kind of typed out 4 big things you need to build resilience, and they put in the faith community, like, they're not a Harvard, well, maybe they used to be Christian way back in the day, but even like secular resources recognize that how important a faith community in spirituality is. So as Christians, we have a lot of wonderful resources at our tools, but I love what Gerald was saying, the chief of which is support. Like, we can't do this alone. Like, Jesus had a relational ministry. Jesus had disciples. We also need other people. The church is a beautiful place to be able to support each other, to love each other, to provide some of that non-judgmental, like, I've been there. Like, how can I help you? Like, I'm bringing you a meal. Like, bring your kids over. Like, call me when they're driving you crazy and I'll meet you at Target and we'll do it together. Like, it's a great place to be able to just help each other and learn from each other. And if you're interested in this topic, I'm going to give you a commercial for Caleb, the spouse. His talk and Wes's talk also kind of expands on that. So that's a great, if you're looking for one to go to this afternoon, or if that's one for register for this afternoon, it's really going to be able to talk a little bit about discipleship. So anything else you want to?
Most of the mental health situations we're seeing with adolescents in terms of diagnostics is anxiety. And do not ever let your child have CBD. Do not is it CBD? Yeah. Don't be doing that. Don't be giving them alcohol. Just the common sense things. The child's brain is still developing, 15, 16, up to 24, and executive function later. So our kids just aren't able to understand fully what's going on in a situation, but they're learning and they're trying. I guess something, when I graduated from high school, sort of like senior graduation day here, when they put all their accomplishments up on the board, mine would have just said Gerald Meredith. But some of these kids, I'm looking, 4.389 grade point average, president of Beta Club, quarterback football team. I'm like, when did this poor child have time to breathe? I mean, and there's nothing wrong with shooting for excellence, but sometimes we got to take a chill pill, and and I'm not saying don't let your kids be academically superior. That's okay, but make sure it's balanced. When I taught at the medical school, I would always introduce and talk to my students, and I'd ask them, what's your dad do? He's a doctor. What's your mom do? Oh, she's a doctor. And I'm like, do you want to be a doctor? Well, that's what everybody else did. But do you want to be a doctor? Well, yeah, that's what everybody else did. So one question I always ask my adolescents is, are you happy? And sometimes just saying that, the tears started flowing. Or, yeah, I'm happy. Why wouldn't I be happy? So that's what it's all about. And sort of like Chris said this morning, we want happy kids. We want successful kids, but we don't want to beat them up to get them to be successful like we want them to be successful. The only job I could never have, my dad said I couldn't be a dishwasher. I loved washing dishes through high school, and I was good at it. And I told my dad that was my aspiration, to be a dishwasher. And he said, let's shoot a little higher than that, son. But my dad I could have been a Greyhound bus driver. That was on my list. They said, just be the best one you can be if that's what you want to do. But dishwasher, he wouldn't let me do that one. But let our kids be happy. Sorry, I talked too much. Thanks.
I think that's a great place to end. Anyone have any questions or anything that we've talked about?
Thank you for making that hand. That was good.
In your opinion, what is the cause of this rise in anxiety? Why are our kids more anxious than we were? What's the difference? What's happening?
I was raised by Dr. Benjamin Spock, the Spock book. Our kids today, you all are just paralyzed by, what is it? Paralyzed.
My kids do not have social media.
Good.
Good work.
That's not a factor. And I know a lot of other kids don't either.
Paralysis.
Some do, but a lot of kids don't, but they're still anxious. So why?
Great question.
Paralysis by analysis. I had Spock. That's all we had. 20 years later, we found out Spock was a socialist, but at the time, we thought Spock was good. Everybody went with Spock. Now we're talking about lawnmower parents, there's orchid parents, there's just, we get anxious, and then we see our kids get anxious, and we wonder, why are my kids anxious? Well, Mom, look at yourself. We're anxious. We just want things to be, and Dad, not just Mom. Sometimes we're having problems with our kids because parents and adolescents may have similar traits that lead to conflict, such as being strong-willed or stubborn. My daughter, Baltimore. She's a lot like me, but she'll do it. I'll think about doing it. She'll do it. But sometimes we have to look at, if we're anxious, it's going to bleed off to our kids. And if we're tired, if there's just, they're constantly wanting something, it sometimes blows. And that's not a real good answer to your question.
I think too, something that I'm saying to kind of piggyback off what Gerald is saying is, your kids don't need to be in like 15 extracurriculars. Like your kids don't need to be like, I have kids that are literally coming into my office with the turtle backpack, and they're saying, okay, after this I'm going to dance, and I'm going to volleyball, and I'm going to this and that and this and that, and I'm like, how are you breathing? Like, how are you breathing? Like, so I give people the Kit Kat parents advice, give them a break, give them a break. Because, childhood is not designed to be that way. Like, we need to give our kids the opportunity to play and to go outside and to, set, and I love how you're saying that your kids are not on social media, because that is I think, very important. But also kind of recognize, we've got to give them open-ended play. We've got to give them our presence, because also what Gerald is saying too is kids are overstressed. I'm serious and come to you, and it's here too. But also parents are overstressed. So create the environment, model the ability to have free and downtime, and recognize your kid is probably not going to the NBA or the NFL. They're probably not. So it's okay to let some of that go. Great. Yeah.
One more question.
Okay.
They'll be available after.
We're available. If we don't get to you, we're available.
What role do you think genetics plays with anxiety and how it's passed down?
Bless
to
you, sir.
families?
Total. Yeah. Can you hear me? That's another thing we always do in our 6 hours of accumulating information. We look at genetics. Sometimes the parents are saying, my child's bipolar. And then we go back all the way through the history. I don't think they're bipolar. Is there any family history of bipolar? But anxiety, we're talking about the neurotransmitters, and we're talking about the GABA centers, the anxiety control. Just like with alcoholism, you can trace back through the family tree. With anxiety, you can trace back. I come from an anxious family. Baltimore's anxious. There's times I'm anxious. Yeah, that's a good question.
That is a great question. Also, thinking back to our earlier when we talked where the fulcrum is, the middle part, genetically, some people are going to be more anxious, so it might slide that way. So that's where we're building in the skills. And so that might be therapy, that might be, groups, that might be just some positive experiences. So that's also a good way to think about it.
Thank you all for being the best parents.
Let's thank our speakers.